Hey everyone, I have a really exciting show for you today because I actually have a friend on this interview, someone I've known for over a decade. And you know what? We've talked real estate like real casually. And I just learned that he's been doing this as long as I have. So this is going to be a fun conversation. How you doing this evening, Chris?
I'm doing great. How are you doing, Mike?
I'm doing very well. Thanks again for doing this. You're a very, very, very busy man, so I appreciate you sliding me in there. Why don't you introduce the audience to who you are, where you're at, and a little bit about you?
I'll do it a little bit like a one rental at a time introduction. I'm a Silicon Valley guy. Been working in high tech for over 20 years now. So most of my real estate investments, which started my real estate investing started in 2004. Most of that stuff was really started to create some sort of passive income potentially, and future assets, so that I didn't have to work until I was 65 or 70 years old. It was really, I never intended on giving up my day job, but I modeled out my income and the price of real estate in California to own a primary home, and especially in the Bay Area. And I wanted to have children, and I wanted to be able to put those children through college and pay for that if possible. So I realized I needed a little something on the side, and that real estate just really spoke to me. I was always interested in it, even when I didn't have money. So
Very cool. So I am curious, as a numbers individual, someone like you who did a lot of traveling, was it was real estate something that you thought of you had to do 30 minutes from your home, or did out of state intrigue you?
yeah.
You remember that beginning?
So let me tell you how it first got started.
Okay.
A buddy of mine, guy named Carlos Gallegos, very smart guy, went graduated from Stanford, then MIT. He lived in Albuquerque, or lives near Taos, but he lived in Albuquerque at the time. And he said, "Hey, there's like some really good deals down here," but he didn't really have the money to invest. And this was in 2004, coming off the tech bubble burst. I mean, all of us got just very similar to your story, right? All of us kind of took a beating on our stock portfolios and
Yep.
started thinking, maybe there's something where I can have a little bit more control over it, because I couldn't have any control over my MCI or WorldCom stock that went to zero, right?
Oh yeah.
So, Carlos and I were talking one day, and he's like, "Hey," or I'm like, "Hey, what are you doing?" And, a guy that's super smart, physics and math and all this stuff. He's like, "Actually, I'm renovating and selling houses." And I'm like, "Well, that's kind of surprising given your educational background." He's like, "Yeah, I really like it. I like the market. I'm building up a team, doing all this stuff." So it started in 2004. I said, "Well, what's your biggest constraint?" And it was financing. And
Okay.
I said, "Well, what if we form a team and we put our money together, and you can run things on the ground, and then myself and another guy, we were more the investor side of it, but we helped out as well. We did things like I did the books and whatnot." And so that's how we got started. And really what we got started doing was buying properties that tended to be about $35,000. Well, actually, those were some of our big successes. Our early successes were, there were these manufactured homes that were on lots. They
Yep.
were not, this wasn't like a manufactured home community, and it wasn't like they were renting space. It's like you own the lot. The home was manufactured. It wasn't a mobile home. It wasn't something you could, put on
Yep.
wheels and get out of there. And they were pretty nice homes. We went down there. They were 3 bedroom, 2 bath, cookie cutter, decent construction. And we could buy these things for $35,000, put about $5,000 in make ready costs, and then rent them out. So we were about 40,000 in.
Yep.
And then we could rent them out for about 700 a month.
There
So,
you go. Yeah.
that was really how we got started. And we had this one community that was just kind of, these things were flipping, and we kind of got known as the guys who bought these things and renovated them and put renters in them. And so we got the deals pretty easily. Then of course our renters decided they wanted to buy these houses off us. And so we ended up turning around and selling all those at a pretty decent profit. The last one we sold, I think we sold for 88,000.
Wow.
So that's the good side of the Albuquerque story. The
Yeah.
bad side was actually the multi-tenant properties, and we ended up the money we made on the single family homes. I'm pretty sure we lost it all back on the multifamily, and I think a lot of that came down to Carlos. His interests, changed. He got married. He had kids. He wanted to move closer to home, so he was no longer, you know, 30 minutes away from our properties. He was now, a couple 3 hours away, and so now we were relying on other people who just weren't as reliable as our partner. And I think
Right.
that's just kind of the beginning of the end. And so we've been fairly slowly, but not fast enough for me, liquidating most of that stuff. We have one property left, which is now just a single family home, which is rented and cash flow positive. But we got rid of all the alligators, to use your term. But we've only got that one property left. So it's more like, let's just get out of this market, right?
Okay.
It's not worth it to maintain a presence for,
So help,
one.
so help me with the timeline. So you buy your first, fixated house, 35, put five
Mhm.
in, rent it for 700. You're a smart guy. Some is good, more is better. So you continue that. You become the buyers for that community. Starts in '04. Is this a 2-year run, 2.5, 3-year run? How long?
We still have that one property, but I would say the big run was up until I really got squeamish in 2007, looking
Okay.
at the ninja loans and all the stuff
Oh,
that was happening out there.
yeah.
So now Albuquerque is a much more stable market. It's probably closer to Fresno than Fresno is to the Bay Area in a lot
Yep.
of ways.
Hmm.
So well, I guess Fresno could be considered part of the Bay Area, but you know what I'm talking
I
about,
do.
the Bay Area proper.
Yep.
So it was a much more stable market, but then when you start seeing the prices go up like crazy out there in an area where there wasn't, most people had government jobs, or there were a lot of military folks there.
Yeah.
It wasn't like salaries were increasing. And I remember one day sitting in a cafe having a nice New Mexican breakfast, which, by the way, I love the food there. Um, some waitress was talking about how she was flipping houses, and she had like 8 or 10 houses, and I'm like, this is the beginning of
Oh, this is not good.
this is the beginning of the end. I knew it right then and there. And so we really started selling our single family. Like I was just like, guys, we got to
We're
like
done. Get out.
clear the tables. And we did the right thing. We actually sold out. We never lost money on a single family
Okay.
home. But when we rotated into these multifamily properties, we went a little too low end, and that was where our mistake was.
And when you rotated in, was that still like '07 or was that like '09? When was that?
I would say that we rotated out of single family, rotated into multifamily. I'm going to say 2007 to 9, like that.
Okay.
That was
Yeah.
the time frame.
Yeah, it's right at the peak. Probably at least my history says the low end looks the best at the peak, right? When
Yeah.
sort of like today, frankly.
Well,
Um,
because you tell yourself these fables like, well, you know, this is, these are Section 8 renters or whatever. They're gonna have the check every month, and it's
yeah.
like, well, it doesn't always work out that way. And when they leave, oftentimes they're punching holes in your walls. And I mean, I can't tell you how many renters we had to evict where we spent thousands of dollars more than we ever collected from them just to make ready for the next tenant to come in and
Yeah.
do the same thing. And I mean, it was, I mean, I don't know, is this a family show? I got one story that's just crazy.
Do it. Tell it.
All right. So we're going through this eviction process, and clearly, and here's the one thing. A lot of these low end renter folks that you got to avoid, they are not professionals at work, but they are professionals at staying in that apartment.
Oh yeah.
Right. So we had one couple. Finally, we got the sheriffs out there. The guy sees the sheriffs are at the door, runs into the bathroom, and slices his wrist. Now, thank God he lived, but the mess he made in that bathroom, like, was, I mean, we had to get a crew out there to clean it
Yeah.
up, because it's
Yeah.
blood, right?
Bio. Yeah. Yeah.
Or the other big thing that was going on 10 years ago back over there, I think we had it a little bit in California, was people were cooking up meth and stuff in some of these rental houses as well. I mean, it was just like, I am permanently soured on that market. Like,
Yeah,
it
sure.
just, there's a lot of stuff going on there that I'm glad we're out, or almost out.
Okay, so
Knock
you
on
got
wood.
one house left that's cash flowing, so that's it's okay.
Yeah,
But I guess I am curious when you say rotated in, my brain says 1031, but I don't want to assume that. I mean, did you just sell, pay taxes, then buy again, or how'd you move money around?
it depends, right? Because the 1031, obviously, you got all the timing issues
Oh
there,
yeah, for sure.
and we were making a pretty steady business. Like, what was happening is we were pretty opportunistic. Like,
Okay.
we would. I mean, a lot of these people were really good renters. Like, and I don't want to scare people off. Like, that market was rough on me, but when you find somebody in a market like that, and I think you just need to adjust the median salary to the market, to the rent.
Hmm.
But when you find somebody who's a good, middle class tenant who's got a decent job history, they come in there, they're paying the $700 a month. A lot of times those people will do the work for you. If something
Yeah.
breaks in the house, they'll say, "Hey, I needed to replace this thing. It was $25." You're like, "Just take it off the next rent check." They're
Yeah.
just the perfect renters, right?
Right.
And a lot of times these people can afford to buy the house, and they they just don't have, in some cases in New Mexico, they didn't have the right documentation because they might have come across the border in a way that you know
Yeah.
didn't allow them to participate in the banking system the way most of us do. But more often than not, they just didn't have the knowledge to really navigate the process of buying a house and financing and all this, and they would clearly have qualified. And so we would, you know, usually a year or two in or whatever, the person at some point would either ask us about, hey, is there something, we would love to buy this house at some point, what
Right.
would it cost? And usually we were able to make it work. And so we were very opportunistic, and we felt good about selling it to people that had been
Yeah.
really good tenants, and we had made our money, and we were, like I mean, honestly, these are pretty decent cash flow properties, but at the same time, like, we felt good about the fact that we were, able to kind
Yeah.
of help this family out. So uh, in general, we weren't 1031ing because we didn't have something lined up, or we didn't.
Right.
I mean, we tried at times, and it just was a tough market. Now we did 1031 in when we saw, like I told you, when we saw that, like, that sea change with the real estate, where all the single family homes were going way up, and
Yeah.
the multifamily were pretty flat.
Yep.
It was like the single family home would go up 50%, and then the multifamily were up like 10%.
Yeah, I
It was
remember.
huge
Yeah.
differential, right? So that's where we got our 1031s in. So
Okay.
yeah.
Very cool. The other thing that I want to go back to in your story is it sounded like, again, I don't want to put words in your mouth, but this is what I heard. The partnership worked great in the beginning.
Yeah.
Then life events happen, and one of the partners wasn't doing the same things that they were doing before, and that
Yep.
caused, you know, things to change. And that's partnerships are hard because you start them with everybody's it's a honeymoon, but then life happens. Is that fair?
Well, and I will say there's two parts to this, and again, Carlos is a great guy,
Yeah.
but one thing I'll never do again is our financial incentives weren't aligned. You know a
Yeah.
lot about sales and comp plans and all that,
Right.
right? It's
Yep.
the Looking back on it, it sounded like a great deal for all of us because we thought we were going to scale up.
Hmm.
And I think where it kind of fell apart was when we hit these bumps in the road, where, first of all, you remember when they slapped that they slapped all sorts of financing rules on 2007, 2008. For instance, I can only own 4 rental properties right now on a mortgage, right?
Yeah.
So stuff like that. But like, everybody, banks did not want to lend any money. They Which is kind of sad, because honestly they could have gotten out of that hole a lot quicker
Oh,
if
absolutely.
they found the right borrowers and they were willing to give money. They would have gotten out of that hole a lot quicker, but instead they froze, and
Yes.
all the people that were credit worthy were sitting there on the sidelines like, "Hey, I'm ready to rock." And these banks were like, the store's closed, right? And so now all
Yeah.
they were doing was sitting on these bad loans, and there's no way to dig yourself out of that hole unless you got new money coming in, right?
Yep.
But they didn't see it that way. And so the problem is the business didn't scale the way we had planned it to. We had a pretty aggressive targets on scale. And then when that hit, it really slowed us down. And I think the economics just didn't work well for Carlos. Like,
Okay.
Myself and the other partner, we're out here in California making our, software company salaries. And Carlos would have gotten there if we could have scaled it, but it just didn't happen. And so at that point, I think it just became a lot less interesting to him. And since he didn't have nearly as much money in the projects as we did, it was just not as interesting for him to continue. And I don't disparage him at all. It was I mean,
Yeah, that's the key thing about partnerships, right? It sounds like two of you are the money and the other one was the skill and the time.
Yes. I mean, unfortunately, yes. I guess he was the skill, yes, and the time.
On the door. I mean, that was what he brought to the table, right?
Yeah, that's true.
Yeah,
for sure. And it would, I think I would go into business with him again, but I would never have our financial incentives aligned any differently. They have to be equal. And we do, and that's the thing. The stuff I got going on in California, it's 3 partners. Our financial incentives are entirely aligned.
Yep.
We've all put in the same amount of money. And that is working like a charm. And those are a bunch of houses, single family homes that we bought in those, those massive auctions that they were having in 2009, 2000. Yeah, that's where we bought all those houses.
All right. Well,
that stuff's great.
Yeah, let's get to that one more minute. We'll close on Albuquerque in a minute. I just want to go back to the lesson learned, right? A lot of people I talk to who work in the Valley like us, who have the incomes that we had or have, they naturally, I don't know why, again, I'll just use me, why I would think I'd go 50-50 with someone who's going to help me to, deploy my capital in a way. It's like, that's the negotiating stance. We're going to be 50-50. You're the time, you're the expertise. You do this all day. I'll keep cranking up my software job. You don't have to do that. It doesn't have to be 50-50.
No.
So.
No, that's a great lesson learned. I wish I'd have talked to you about 15 years ago.
I don't think I would have known it 15 years ago. I'm just putting it out there for the next Chris and Mike.
No, I trust me. Like, these are avoidable, very easily avoidable mistakes, right? And the fact is, I was young and dumb, and I talked to a friend of mine who was a lawyer who drew up the partnership docs. We formed an LLC out there, and he said, "This is not going to work because you guys, 2 of you are structured one way and your other partner is structured another way. He's putting in less money and all this." And I'm like, "Well, he doesn't have the money. This thing doesn't exist.
Yeah, it doesn't. Just stops
without our money." And he says, "I wouldn't do it." And looking back, most of his incentive was tied to the scaling and the profitability, right? He would get a good chunk on the profitability on the back end, but when the market stalled, when the project stalled, this guy just wasn't able to make an income, and now he had to go out and do other stuff, and that's that just didn't work out well.
Yeah.
And I think it's I should have heeded that advice, and it feels like we all have to trip that first landmine ourselves before we believe what other people tell us, and so hopefully your audience is actually smarter than we were.
Yeah, maybe. Well, hopefully, I hope they listen. This is painful stuff. So let's switch to a happier time. So now you come to California. Actually,
I got one quick story of a flip. Please. Which was unintentional. So we talked about those massive auctions they had after the bubble burst, and everybody was getting kicked out of their houses. So I went down to Las Vegas, and because I wanted to buy a vacation home, actually.
So this is like 09 or 10, just so we have time.
This was in 09.
Okay.
Yeah. And I was at HP, and the job wasn't that hard. So I was like, you know what? Well, I won't say much more than that. I had a company car, which made it really easy to drive down to Vegas all the time. And so I drove down there and went to one of those big, or actually I looked at a bunch of houses. Then I went to one of those big auctions, and I ended up buying one. I'll tell you, I'll give you a few things after this, but I ended up buying one for $330,000. It was like something that was meant to be a vacation home. I wanted it for my family, for my parents, etc.
Wow.
So I bought this home for $330,000. I went down there, and of course it's been baking in the Vegas sun without AC on and all this. So I had to go in there and do some, fix all the toilets and anything that had moving parts in it needed to be cleaned or fixed up. But it wasn't that bad. I think the make ready for it was probably $5,000. It wasn't that
Oh,
bad. I did a lot of manual labor. I refinished the floors myself. I recaulked everything
wow.
myself. I did get a plumber out there to, to fix some of the toilets and all that.
Hmm.
But I did most of the work myself. So I was in 330 plus, 5, so
Yeah.
335 at that point. Then this agent comes to me and says, "Hey, are you interested in selling this house?" And I was about 2 months in at that point, and the house was ready. I was like, I had my parents out to the house to see it, no furniture or anything. I was like, this is it. I'm ready to go.
Yeah.
And this realtor approached me unsolicited and said, "I have a buyer for your house at 450." And I'm like,
Yeah.
what are you talking about? And he said, "Well, there was this couple that tried to buy the house at 450 like 6 months ago, but because the banks weren't lending, they couldn't get it in order. It went to the auctioners, and basically they've been trying ever since to like
To get it.
figure out how to get in here. They finally lined up their financing. They're willing to pay 450. That's what they offered before." And I'm like, you know what? Crap, take it, 450. So that was my only flip. It wasn't intentional at all. But
That's funny.
yeah. So anyway, the few things I'll say about actually this experience of going through that '09 and 10, with all the auctions, hopefully we never have another real estate bust like that in
Oh, yeah.
in our lifetimes, but it's probably likely to happen given the way things work.
Yeah.
Um, but I would say that one of the things I had to become expert at a couple things, which I'm not proud nor not proud, not I'm neither proud nor not proud of, which is one of the things that you need to understand if and when that ever happens again is I had to become an expert at getting into houses. And I wouldn't break windows. I wouldn't do any damage to the house, but I would definitely carry around stuff that allowed me to get in through side garage doors and things like that. And the reason why is because what I noticed would happen was a lot of these. So what happens is that the auction company gets just this massive tranche from the banks of like
Yeah.
listing.
Yep.
And then what happens is the auctioneers, they go out and they contract with local real estate agents to hold open houses on these. And they usually do it all in like one weekend.
Yep.
It's like one massive weekend of open houses, and then the auction occurs like the next weekend, something like
Yep.
that.
Exactly.
So one of the things I noticed was the really good stuff was being held in pockets. The agents that were because an agent would have like 3 or 4 listings. Every agent in Las Vegas, it felt like they had 3 or 4 of these foreclosure listings. But what they would do is they would find if they had a really cherry one, they'd hold the 3 crappy ones that had cement in the toilets and had
Yeah.
walls punched out. They would leave those open. They would open those up. But the ones that were in really good shape that nobody had done any damage to, they would like the doors were locked. You'd show up at the time it was supposed to be open and it wouldn't be open. And those were the really good properties, and they would hold them because they were probably going to get their friends or their family or somebody else to buy them at auction. And if nobody could see it, that would artificially keep the price low at auction.
Huh.
So that I had to get really good at finding my way into these houses so that I could check, because in
Yeah.
Vegas, it was like literally 20% of the houses that I looked at, people had just done massive damage, like ripped everything out. The entire kitchen was just destroyed, like with a sledgehammer. So you
Yeah.
needed to be able to do that. Now, sometimes you can just look through the windows and you can see it, but if you're about to spend a couple $100,000 on something, you want to like get in there and actually check it out, right?
Yep.
So I would say, I'm not saying everybody should go out and buy a lockpick kit, but a lot of times you can use a credit card and jimmy the lock on the side. And usually in these houses,
Yeah.
the garage door to the main house, from the garage to the house, is actually not locked. You just need to get into that little side door, which is really easy to jimmy.
There you go. So when you were at these auctions, just because I asked everyone, you were paying cash, I'm guessing, or you had an equity line, or stroked a check, or partners involved, 50-50?
So the way I had it set up, and so the ones in Vegas, I paid cash and then I financed out of it.
Yep. Yeah.
You had to be ready to write a check.
Yep.
And that was how it was compelling. These companies weren't waiting 30 days for you to close.
Yeah. More damage.
Yeah. And so that was that.
Okay.
In California, it was the same thing, but I had 2 partners.
Right.
So we were, I was basically putting up a third of the cash, but everything we financed out of. And then we had another another refi, I want to say in like maybe 2011, where the rates dropped and we refied everything again.
Okay.
Now we didn't, we actually just refied the existing balance. We didn't take any cash out because by then the market had kind of started climbing again, and we weren't really, and we couldn't get loans anyway because we were all maxed out. But it was, if we could have, if the deals were still there, we would have probably financed down to, you know, an 80-20 and then, you know, pulled the cash out.
Right.
Yeah.
All right. So you were in Vegas for that first deal. Did you buy more in Vegas?
So after I got that quick flip, I bought another one, but I bought a townhouse. Now the thing I learned with the first one, the one that was 330, it was a beautiful house, but the more I was down there and like fixing this thing up, the more I realized it was probably a little too much house. It was pretty cool. It was in a really good neighborhood. Like my neighbors, like one of Michael Jackson's brothers was my neighbor, like Tito or one of those guys.
Okay.
There was an NBA player who was my neighbor. It was a really bougie neighborhood, and I got in for 330, and everybody in the neighborhood hated me because the house had sold in 2005, brand new. It had sold for 875.
Oh yeah.
And so, but so what I ended up doing is I ended up taking all my profits from that, and actually buying a townhouse about half a mile away. It's in this neighborhood this area called Lake Las Vegas. And I ended up buying a townhouse, and I've owned that ever since, and kind of don't use it and should get rid of it. But it was just, I bought it again at an auction. It was really cheap. And so it was
just a vacation pad for you, or is it another rental?
It's mostly my parents use it. No, it's too nice to rent. Like that was a mistake on that. You know, that one is, I would love to rent it out as like an Airbnb or something, but it was just gorgeous. It's nicer than my house here. I mean, it was, you know, I bought it for like 120 or something like that, but or maybe 146 is what I paid for it. So the money I made on the flip plus the down payment I'd put down, I think is what bought it.
Moved it in, yeah. Okay.
And but it was, you know, it was granite. It was like stainless steel appliances. The floors were beautiful. It was just such a nice place. I'm like, I don't want renters like punching holes in the walls.
Yeah.
So I just decided, you know, people go crazy in Vegas. I didn't want them in my house.
Yeah, so. I would make the same decision, frankly. All right, so now we jump to California. You got two other partners, still doing auctions. So I'm curious, how many did you end up buying at auctions in total, you think?
So there's the two in Vegas, you know, but the townhouse I bought with cash. I knew I didn't want to use one of my slots on it. You know, you got 4 slots, right?
Yeah, I remember. Yeah.
So I didn't want to use one of my slots and take out a loan on that one. So we each bought 4 properties.
So 12.
Yeah. So 12. We've since liquidated a couple of them, but we still have 9. We still have 9.
So you were buying these, what, 2010 through 2012?
We were buying these 2010, I believe is the date on them. Yeah.
Oh, you just went hog wild, bought them as fast as possible.
We bought most of them over a 2 or 3 week period in 2010.
Wow.
Yeah. It was just like nuts. It was nuts.
All right. So were you particular about cities or size or 3-bedroom, 2-bath?
Not very particular about cities. So everything we bought is within, it was within a half an hour.
Okay.
It's in Richmond, San Pablo, and the unincorporated part of Contra Costa County, which is like around Richmond, San Pablo. It's all our houses are within a 10-minute.
Okay. All right.
And we bought them all for pretty much dirt cheap. I mean, we were, I would say the average house we were paying. Okay, I don't want to say the average because there's that one that pulls it up a little bit. I'd say the median that we were buying, and most of them were right around here, was about 170K.
Okay.
And we were instantly sitting on like 1,700, 1,800 in rent, which in like the Bay Area, to be able to do 1%, like I was like, okay, we're in good shape.
Now was there make readies? Hold on, were there make readies? 170 is an all-in number.
It was. We were pretty particular about the stuff we bought.
Okay.
There weren't much. I mean, nothing was more than 5K.
Okay, so fair enough. Nice. Wow.
So yeah, and I think that number, it takes that into account. Yeah,
Okay.
about 170 on average, and we were 1,700, 1,800 in rent.
1% in the Bay proper.
Yeah, no, it was like once in a lifetime, probably. Now here's the thing though that screwed it all up.
Okay.
And by the way, these are super cash flow positive, and they've all
Yeah, I think so.
and they've appreciated like crazy. But here's the one thing that was really bad. So what happened, I'm sure you're well aware, right around 2011, 2010, probably 2010 even, but 2011 it got started really, really badly. It was everybody went to get their property taxes reassessed
Yeah.
because they're like, hey, the next door neighbor's house sold for 150 grand. You can't tell them my house is worth 350, right?
Yeah.
So over the course of the next year or so, pretty much every single family home in that area got reassessed.
Yeah.
So then the city is sitting there going, how are we going to pay the bills? And so they enacted all these like non-owner occupied taxes. And so if you look at if you look at the actual tax rate we have on our house, like in California, obviously, you're only allowed to have 1% tax on the value, and it's only allowed to go up 2% per year, right? So
Prop 13. Yep.
right. So what they do is they do these parcel taxes. Oh, you got to pay this much for the school, and you got to pay this much for, you know, uh,
Yeah. Fees.
whatever, the sewer fees and all this other stuff, right? And so they, the way they got us, because some of the stuff they were trying to do was unconstitutional, but the way they nailed us is they put in these new regulations for inspections.
Yes. Oh yeah.
So what would happen is you had to have an inspection, and everybody who had a rental property, you had to have an inspection,
Yep.
like right there. Now, what happened is after the inspection, the inspector would tell you when the next inspection had to occur. Now, the rules stated that it could be anywhere from 12 to 60 months. Well,
Okay.
coincidentally, they were always 12 months out. And here's the other thing they would do. They would find the most minor thing, and they would say, well, I need to come back for a reinspection, and that's another $90 fee or whatever it was.
Just to show up. Yep.
And it was just the craziest stuff. Like one window in your house would be a little stuck. It was still open,
Yeah.
but just a little stuck. And the guy's like, I'm sorry, I'm going to have to come back and reinspect that after you get it fixed. And it was just it's a total scam. It's still going on. But
It was a money grab. They were starving.
They were starving, and they're like, you know what? The only people with money are like landlords. But it was really unfair, and it really impacted the cash flow until our rents started increasing. Now, the good thing is this area rebounded reasonably well.
Yeah.
So the rents have gone up, fairly steadily. I mean, we're actually pretty cool. Like if our tenants are good and they're like, we are very, like, we don't push it. We're not trying to turn properties over.
Yeah.
We want to make sure that we, even if I can get 1,900 on this property and this person's paying 1,600, if they've been like really great,
Yeah.
like
Just let them go.
yeah. Maybe we go take it to 1620 or something. We're not trying to maximize.
Yeah.
We want to maximize our happiness. We want to maximize their happiness, and we want to maximize the lack of drama, right?
Yeah. Lack of turns. So that's what kills landlords. They just don't get it, right? That it's the turns that kill you. So I'm guessing these fees or these inspections have cooled off in the.
It has cooled off, and the rents have gone up. And so it's not as bad as it used to be. I think we finally got an inspection last year that came back and said we didn't need one for 3 years. So they're finally, seems like they're kind of ratcheting back on the.
Yeah, well, they clearly, frankly, don't want to be doing. I'm sure it's a hassle for them as well. I'm sure.
Yeah.
But again, they were looking at, I can't fund schools, I can't fund the police department. I'm sure they were looking at a bad situation, right? So, not saying it's right, but at least I understand.
No, and I got it. I mean, I'm like, look, there's no other cow around here to be milked, right? It's like I'm not as bitter about it as I sound. I just wish I had known that was going to happen before I bought.
Yeah, I don't know that we could. In all my research, I've never read about anything like that. But I'm seeing it now. I've seen it in Fresno for the last 5 or 6 years, right? We didn't get hit so bad with inspections until the last 5 years or so. But it happens, and they hit apartments a lot harder than they hit single families. So. Fun for me.
Yeah, for sure. No, that's the one thing I like about single families. I mean, obviously I read your book, and you made a really smooth transition from single family to multifamily, kind of like what I described in Albuquerque, except in your case it worked.
Yeah.
But I mean, the intent was there. It was the right idea. It just the execution didn't work for us.
Well,
But
I think you went to, if you will, a D property, and maybe you should have gone to a B minus, had a little bit less units, and
yeah,
trauma would have been different. I don't know. I'm guessing at this.
no, I'm with you. I'm with you.
Yeah.
You're spot on with that. So what I would say that's nice about single family, especially for the people that watch this, is that in the end, it is a much more liquid asset.
No question.
And that is the one benefit is, if Richmond ever turned up the pain too much, we knew we could unload it, make a profit. We would make a decent profit off of it. And that was like with multifamily, it's like definitely high reward on the cash flow side if you do it right. But if you buy something that turns into an alligator, you could be in trouble.
Well, that's actually a really, really good point. And I just want to reiterate that. Let's just say some city, all right, city X in state Y decides they need money again for some reason, and they're going to go after investors. The investor who has a single family home, they could sell because they have a buyer and an owner occupant. If you
Yeah.
own a multi-unit building, the only person you could sell to is another investor, and they're going to stick it to you because all of those fees and costs are going to have you lower the price because the value is less. So I think that's a great point. I guess the last thing I want to talk about is sort of the time element because, you bought, I still can't believe you bought 12 houses in 2 or 3 weeks. That's awesome. I guess here, let me ask you this question. Do you wish you would have bought more? If they would have said you could have 8 loans each, would you have doubled up?
I would have bought I would have at least been willing to go 3 to 4x what we did. We felt so confident with that. I don't think I've felt more confident with any investment decision in my life than buying those houses because
for sure. Yeah.
we knew exactly what the rental market looked like. Now the third partner we picked up, so the other money partner I had in Albuquerque, his mom has been in commercial real estate her whole life. She's one of these Chinese women who just knows how to find the right team.
Yeah.
She's been doing it since we were kids, and they've owned complexes and ran complexes like a family business that were 300 plus units.
Wow.
So she has this track record. She's amazing, and she knows. I don't know if she's abiding by all the rules around discrimination and whatnot, but she knows how to find the renter. She can just kind of see the ones that are going to pay the rent.
Yeah.
She's got a really good track record, and which is, again, I probably shouldn't have said that, but fact is, she is just like a cash register. I would have, and I knew this my whole life growing up.
Right.
I think my interest in real estate probably originated from all the fact that my partner, his father retired from his job, I think before he was 40, because they own these apartments down in Los Angeles, and then they bought the big one down in San Diego, and it was just like they just knew how to do this and live. I mean, obviously they worked really hard for this, but they were their own bosses. There were times when they were generating cash flow that was unbelievable, and I think that just being around that family and seeing how it operated, and I remember one spring break I went down and was hanging out with him in the San Diego place, and just during the day kind of helping out, making ready units and stuff so that they could flip units. And it was just like, I was like, I love this. I love real estate, and it was so tangible, unlike buying stocks or something where I was like, I felt really, good about myself. Oh, I just bought, Apple and they got a 2.6% dividend or whatever it is.
Yeah.
But it's like, this was something tangible, right? This is something where the difference between a good landlord and a crappy landlord is a big difference in the lives of the people that live there. And I was like, you could do something good for them and still be great for you and your family. And at the end of the day, every time I was going to sleep, I was tired. I was like dying to just hit the pillow and go to bed because I'd been working hard all day, scrubbing floors and cleaning kitchens. And it was just like a really, I think even though I've been drawn probably to the money of the Valley, I'm actually somebody who really does like manual labor to some extent.
Yeah.
Not always, but I don't mind getting my hands dirty, you know?
No, I know.
And honestly, I kind of like those people. I like people that are middle class people. They're sort of my, you know, they're kind of my people.
There you go. That's
So
awesome. So there's a lot there. So I guess one thing I want to talk about, because again, you bought these at the bottom and now it's 9 years later.
yeah.
I'm guessing up 150% in value and rents are up 40%. Just rough guesses.
I'd have to look at I would have to look at our financials. I would say that on average, these houses that we were all in, like 170. Well, okay, so first of all, are you asking appreciation of the house or appreciation of our principal?
No, the house. So the house went from 170 to, I'm guessing 400, 420.
Yeah, I think that that's pretty
Roughly,
safe
right?
estimate is definitely 170 to, I mean, there's some of them that are over 500. There's some of them that are probably 350.
Yeah. The key
Yeah.
there I'm getting at is time is good. If you buy right, time's your friend.
Right. And obviously you're paying down principal the entire time. And something else you said in your book that resonated with me is on these these investment properties, we were putting down like 30-35% usually.
Yeah, conservative. Yeah.
Right. So like, you know, we've been paying down principal. I don't know exactly where these are at because we refinanced them and so we probably refinanced back into a 30-year in 2011. So they're 8 years in on a 30-year. We probably, you know, we probably pay down at least 15% of that principal.
Sure.
Because obviously it escalates, but it's good, right? I mean, we're in a good spot, and you know, as long as her name's Mrs. She, as long as Mrs. She just keeps, and don't anybody here try to look her up and use her because she's ours. But as long as Mrs. She just keeps, you know, plugging away and is enjoying what she's doing, we're going to be in great shape. It's like I get residual checks every year. Every year the check is different size. Some years it's pretty big. Some years it's, you know, $5,000. But the house is getting paid down. We've got nice reserves. You know, we've got really good tenants. It's a pretty nice operation. Yeah.
And then rents, that's the other side I want to go to. Not only inflate in value, but rents go up, I'm guessing, from, you know, 2010 to 19.
Yeah, I mean, the rents have gone up a lot, but we haven't taken advantage of all that.
Sure, of course.
So I would say that now, anytime a place turns over, we definitely, you know, capture a good chunk. I would say that the rents we were charging back in 2010 when we put them on the market versus now, I'm guessing 30+%. I don't know if it's quite 40, but yeah, it's probably part of it's 40 is there if we wanted it, but I think we're just being conservative.
Yeah, that's great. And I guess the last thing I want to talk about is going back to, you would have done 3 or 4x because you were so confident. And that really goes back to kind of where we started, is the real estate market would have healed itself faster if banks would have lent to investors that were qualified versus liar loans or ninja loans or whatever you want to call them. And that's just another example. You were ready to go and would have done 3 or 4x.
Well, part of the reason I was ready to go, I don't know if I ever told you the story, but like I had a conversation with my wife in 2007 and I said, look, we need to sell our house, like our primary residence.
In 07. Oh, pre-crash. Okay.
And you know, I mean, I think you and we were in the market, we were seeing all this stuff.
Oh, I remember. Yeah.
The appreciation of the price of the real estate, the fact that people were getting in with 0 down loans that were going to reset in 2 years, or, I mean, it was just
horrible.
It was crazy.
As I said in the book, I stopped because my Excel spreadsheet broke. I was like, I don't get it.
No. So it's funny because we lived in this house in San Bruno. We had bought it for $790,000. It was, and this was like a pretty maybe middle-class neighborhood, maybe like bottom of the upper middle class. It wasn't like the nicest neighborhood. It was a nice house though, on the side of a hill. And I saw one of our neighbors' houses went for 1.1 million. I said, okay, this is it. We're out of here. So, and we had bought the house in 2003, sold it in 2007.
Wow.
So it had gone up that much, and it was a brand new house when we bought it. It was, you know, like I was just like, look, let's just take the money and we're going to go rent an apartment. And that's what we did.
Wow.
So,
Downsize. That takes balls right there. Lots of people say they wanted to do that, but you actually did it.
well, and that's the thing that's scary, right? Is because your whole life, growing up in California, people say, oh, if you ever, leave California, you never afford to move back.
Yeah, you
Or
never come back. Yeah.
if you sell your house, you're never going to be able to get another one, right?
Yeah.
It was a little bit scary, but I was at that point in my life where we didn't have, my daughter was born in 2008.
Okay.
So we didn't have kids yet. And I think I was looking at it like, you know what, if we can't afford to get back in, that's fine. I'll move to Texas or something.
Yeah.
So I think I was just a little bit like, it was a good life situation to even consider that as well.
Okay.
So I wasn't so much afraid I'm like, if I can't afford to get back in, I can't afford to get back in. I still got this big pile of money because I sold my house and made, 400 grand on it or 300 grand on it. So it was good. We sold the house, moved into an apartment, and over the course of the next 2 years, we know what happened. Now it didn't go all as planned, and we probably didn't get exactly the bottom on some of the stuff, and we didn't get out. I mean, I liquidated a huge portion of our 401ks and other like stocks, but not enough. And
Yeah.
so it was like we just, I mean, we went really conservative, not as conservative as we should have, but in the end, it worked out fine.
Yeah.
But the reason I would have bought 3 or 4x the number of properties is because with what we bought and what the banks would allow us to buy, right?
Yeah.
There was no way that this investment was ever going to lead to me being able to not work. Maybe I'd be able to retire at 60 instead of 65, or 55 instead of 60, but it wasn't the type of thing where I could do what you've done and like walk away and actually manage my real estate portfolio. I didn't have, I was afraid of hard money lenders. I know you talked about that in the book.
Yeah.
I didn't have the family and friends who wanted a nice, the 6-20 plan or whatever, that wanted a nice return that would have given me money. Everybody I knew was freaked out, right? They were either super rich, they didn't have any interest in anything like any of my nickel and dime stuff, or they were freaking out. And, and so I think I just didn't see that path. But if I could have bought 3 or 4 times the number of houses we bought, I could have seen a path to actually, financial independence that didn't require me, to work, 70, 80 hours a week.
Yeah.
And I would have gone for it for sure, because I didn't, that was before the best job I've ever had, which is, the company I just left.
Yep.
And so I didn't know what my future had. And honestly, tech wasn't making me rich. It was paying the bills.
Yeah. Yeah.
So,
I got you.
but anyway.
Cool. So now you are where you are. So your real estate portfolio today, obviously the house you live in, your vacation property that's really nice in Vegas, and your 12 California houses. That's
I think we're down to 9. I think I mentioned.
9. I'm sorry. That's right.
We're down to 9, but that 9 is in a partnership. So
yeah, you get a third of whatever.
Yeah,
do you have plans for the future? Are you looking to add more? Or you're like, nope, I'm you got some cash and you'll maybe invest if it crashes, but not adding anything?
It's interesting because when I decided I was going to leave my previous job,
mm-hmm.
I wasn't sure I wanted to go back into the workforce. I found a company I really liked and a job that I was really excited about, so that kind of killed that. But if I hadn't have found that company and that job that I really wanted, there was a possibility. Like, to me, this is something I could do, as a semi-retirement, where you're kind of, you're working hard, but you can kind of like, you can sort of turn the knob to how much you really want to work. It's like, if I just want one project at a time and just go serially one after another, make it kind of easy.
Yeah.
Or if I'm willing to parallelize and do 2 or 3 at the same time, like, that's hard work. Right. And so I kind of like the idea. I've got a California CRE book somewhere over here, figure I could take the exam and eventually.
I think you'd be just fine.
Yeah. So I don't know. I could see myself doing more in real estate in the future. I think starting a new job up, it's probably not going to do any more in the near term.
Okay. Well, very cool, man. Your story is always fun. You tell it so well, both the good and the bad. I learned more stuff today about you, Chris, and that's always fun. So I just want to thank you for your time and wish you well in your newest adventure.
Well, congratulations on your adventure. And I love the fact that you're looking after people and trying to make other people have passive income. And honestly, I don't really see a whole lot in it for you other than just, good community service. So
Yeah.
congrats and thanks for that.
All right, buddy. Thank you.
Talk to you later.